We continue our series on real people, real impact, lessons from Bible characters and their choices. And if we want to just quick review, the first character was Daniel, right? And no compromise. And then last week, Pastor Joby, we'll never forget, he climbed the tree right there. And it was so realistic on Zacchaeus. I will not climb any trees today. So what is this picture? You know, yesterday, as I was preparing, the kids came running into my room, screaming. And they had built a tower, and one of them, I won't put anyone at, I won't let you know who made the mistake. One of them made the tower fall. And so the other one was so upset. And that person was saying, it's such a waste, all our time. We had spent all day building this tower, and now it's ruined. It's ruined. And the other one felt bad, kept saying sorry. And they said, you know, you weren't careful, it's your fault, back and forth. But I share that because many times in life, we make things fall. We break things, and then we feel regret. Sometimes it's much more serious, right, than a tower. Sometimes we look back at our life, and we think, if only I had done something different, if I could have made certain choices. I know many of us in this room, we live sometimes with feelings of regret. Now, we know as Christians we should never regret, but there is that tendency to think, I wish I had done something better. So, you know, today we want to talk about this idea of what do you do when you fail? What do you do when you make a mistake? And we're going to look at two characters, Judah and Judas. Did you know that Judah and Judas is the same name? When I was young, I used to tell people, please never name your son Judas, because God knows who does not pay. You know that? It's a good joke. But I didn't realize that the name Judas is the Greek name of the name Judah, which is in Hebrew. And I thought about it, you know, they are similar in certain ways. Both Judah and Judas sold someone special to them. And we will look at the result of their decisions as we go through the series. So, what are the three main points? First, what is fake repentance? Second, what is true repentance? And third, what is the road to true repentance? Now, I didn't say hello to everyone, but I know some of you are watching online as well. So hello, I forgot to greet you. And the other satellites that are streaming, hello. And I'm so glad we're here together. So, let us look at the story of Judas first. Now, Judas, his name, some interpret it to be Judas of Kiriath, a town from the tribe of Judah. And it is the Greek form of Judah. Something about Judas, right? The name Judah and Judas means praise. Both of them have the same meaning in their name. Judah, I remember, I'm going to get confused. Judas was personally chosen by Jesus. You know, Judas saw all the miracles. Judas was there when he raised Lazarus from the dead. Judas was there when Jesus fed the thousands. Judas was there when he saw how compassionate Jesus was to the poor, and so on and so forth. Judas ate with Jesus. So if anyone should fall in love with Jesus, Judas was one of them, right? He was one of the disciples. But what happened to Judas? In fact, he had a job. He had a ministry. His ministry was he was in charge of finance. Judas was in charge of the money bag. So what happened to Judas? We read the verses, but I'll review it. One of the 12, named Judas, went to the priest and said, what are you willing to give me? How much will you give me to betray him to you? And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. From then on, he began to look for an opportunity to betray Jesus. What is 30 pieces of silver? Yes, it was prophesied in the Old Testament, but beyond that, it is simply the price, the legal compensation for the life of a slave. So Judas and the religious teachers valued Jesus' life no higher than a common slave. Ask yourself, why would someone who had lived with Jesus, seen all that he did, value him so little? Is that all he was worth to him? And before we judge Judas, let's remember, if we're not careful, I have traded Jesus for things of very little value in my life. Simple, small pleasures that I know God isn't proud of, right? So sometimes, we have more in common with Judas than we think. Then when Judas, who had betrayed Jesus, saw that he had been condemned, he felt remorse. So Judas felt bad. And he returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. But they said, what is that to us? See to that yourself. So at this point, we read this, we don't realize, sometimes we don't connect it. Jesus has not yet been crucified. He was handed over to Pilate, and Pilate hadn't yet brought Jesus in front of the crowds. So Judas felt remorse, and then, even though Jesus wasn't crucified yet, it says he threw the pieces of silver into the temple, departed, and then went away and hung himself. I want to point out a few things. Now, we know that it was prophesied that this would happen. But Judas still made the choice. Judas did not look for Jesus. Judas didn't wait for Jesus on the path and shout, I'm sorry. Judas didn't, try to find a way to see Jesus on the cross and just beg him. I didn't know they would do this. I don't know what went through Judas' mind. But what happened to Judas? He quit. He saw his mistake. He was saddened by it, but instead of going to God, which is the point of our message, Judas gave up. And this is a very important point, because when we talk about repentance, many people feel remorse, but we stop there. We feel sad, but we don't go farther. I ask myself, why would Judas do this? What happened to Judas? And I think it is worth studying a little bit more about him. Judas, one of his disciples, who was intending to betray him, said, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to poor people? So there was a lady who put perfume on Jesus and Judas on Jesus, and Judas said, hey, why wasn't this sold for the poor? The Bible tells us, now he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief. And he had the money box he used to pilfer what was put in it. Remember, Judas had a job. He was in charge of the money. And what would he do with the money? He would steal from it. I think, and I believe, that by constantly taking money, just a little at a time, from the money box, as he watched Jesus, that small sin, maybe it started with something small, it blocked him from seeing Jesus. There's a verse that tells us, it says, encourage one another day after day, and all the more, as long as it is called today, so as long as we're alive, so that none of us will be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Sin it hardens our heart. And I assume it hardened Judas' heart to the point that he could not see Jesus, even though he lived with him. While it is said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as when they provoke me. So, I think one of the challenges for us, even for older Christians, is this. Sin, it has a hardening factor on our conscience. And if we're not careful, you can go to church, you can read the Bible, you can pray, but if you allow sin to linger, small sin, it's the small ones that are more dangerous, right? Because the big ones, it's obvious. But the small ones, those are the ones that get us. That hardens our heart. And we see the progression. If Judas had been told, hey, you start stealing, one day you're going to betray this man you chose to follow. Maybe he would have not. But we know that's God's story, right? He wrote that into the plan. So there's a verse that tells us, for the sorrow that is according to the will of God produces a repentance without regret, leading to salvation. But the sorrow of the world produces death. So let us remember from the story of Judas, let us be aware and careful. Be careful of small sins, but let us also understand that what? Repentance involves sorrow for the act of sin, and it should not stop at remorse, which is sorrow for the consequences. A repentant person is sorry he sinned, and he goes back to God. I'm going to add that in the next, later on you'll see that. A remorseful person is sorry he sinned, and it just stops there. So there's a difference between remorse and repentance. That is the story we learn from Judas. Now we're going to go to the story of Judah. What is true repentance? I'm excited to talk about Judah because every time we talk about the story in the Old Testament, who do we talk about? Instead of Judah, we talk about Joseph. How many have seen Joseph the Dreamer? It's an old play, right? How many of you know about Joseph? You know the story of Joseph, right? An amazing story. We could do a series just on Joseph. Judah, we don't talk about much. And there's actually not too many verses about him. But Judah is the fourth son. Not the first, not the second, not the third. It's the fourth. The first is Reuben. The second is Simeon. The third is Levi. Judah is the fourth. And when he was born, Leah praised the Lord and named him Judah. Praise. So that's his name. Here's the story of Judah and his family. They were not a model family. You know, the Bible tells us Joseph, when he was 17 years of age, he was pasturing the flock with his brothers, which included Judah, while he was still a youth, and Joseph brought back a bad report about them to his father. So si Joseph nagsumbong. How many of you like someone who makes sumbong? Raise your hand. You know, my kids, God bless them. Taylan and Trayson, magsumbong means when you complain about each other to your dad. Dad, da-da-da did this. Dad, da-da-da did this, right? And I always tell them, hey, try to solve it first. Don't always come running to me. But no one likes someone who makes sumbong. So they did not like him. But more than that, Jacob didn't do his job either. Israel, who's Jacob, loved Joseph more than all the sons, the other sons. Guys, we learn this in parenting. Parenting 101. Do not have any favorites. But Jacob did not just have a favorite in his mind. He made him a vari-colored tunic. He gave him a special robe. You get the nicest iPhone. You are the best son. Your daughter will have an old Nokia, your sister, she will have an old Nokia. You get an iPhone 16 Pro Max, right? And if you're the other children, you're like, why doesn't daddy love us? What happens? When you're young, emotionally, right? It breeds contempt for the other. So his brothers saw that their father loved him more. So they knew it. And so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. You think Jacob would have realized this is not a good thing. But they had no motivate book back then, so just kidding. It's an old joke. They didn't have parenting conferences, and Jacob didn't fix it. Then Joseph had a dream. And when he told his brothers what? They hated him even more. So Joseph made the situation worse. I share this because sometimes we think Judah was such a bad guy, but Judah had his reasons. Joseph told them, you'll all worship me. So they really did not like him even more. What happened? They saw him from a distance, and when he was coming close, so Jacob said, hey son, go see your brothers, check on them. So Joseph goes to check on them. And as they are seeing him from a distance, what did they do? They said, let's put him to death. Can you believe this? This is the family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob mentioned in the Bible. This is the family of God, the children of God, right? The Israelites. They said, let's put our brother to death. There he is, the dreamer. Now then, come, let us kill him and throw him into the pits. Judah said to his brothers, I want you to see what Judah said. He said, what profit is it for us? Does this remind you of something that Judah said? Judah said to the priests, how much will you give me if I betray Jesus? What did Judah say to his brothers? What will we get if we kill him? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, because he is our brother and our own flesh. So at least there's some decency for life, right? He said, let's just sell him. We'll get something out of it. He is our own brother. Let's not kill him. And they listened to him. Interesting. Why did the brothers listen to Judah? He's only number 4. In the Old Testament, usually, who's the leader? Son number 1. Who's son number 1? Reuben. What did Reuben do? He slept with his father's concubine. He lost his birthright due to immorality. What is son number 2 and 3? Simeon and Levi. What did they do? They were violent. They killed the men of Shechem. And because of that, Jacob said, I become a stench. So they lost their leadership. So who's the next in line? Judah. And his brothers listened to him. If you are the next leader in your family, but your father has a favorite, then if the favorite disappears, who might be the next favorite? Maybe you. Right? So when Judah also schemed to get rid of Joseph, he stands to get something from it. Not just money, but also status in the family. Then some Midianite traders passed by. They pulled him and lifted him out of the pit and said to him, sold him for how much? 20 shekels of silver. How much was Jesus sold for? 30. This is 20 shekels of silver, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. So there are similarities in Judah and Judas. What happened? Now they have a problem. This is the favorite son of their dad. Now they have to tell their dad what happened. What did they do? They didn't say anything. They dipped the tunic in blood, and they sent it and brought it to their father. And they said, Oy, Dad, kanino to? Have you seen this? Please examine it. Is this belonging to Joseph? And they're acting innocent, right? Because what? They have to cover it up. So what did their father do? Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned many days. And then all the sons and daughters, they tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son. So his father went for him. I'm going to pause here. Can you imagine what it's like? You are Judah, and there's 10 of you. So 20 pieces of silver is divided by 10. You're carrying in your pocket 2 pieces of silver, and your dad is mourning. Will something change? Maybe for some people, no. But imagine if that was you. If you saw your father weeping, and he will not be comforted. Maybe a little bit of like, hey guys, this wasn't worth it. We should not have sold our brother. Look, all we have is 2 pieces of silver each. And our dad, look how sad he is. So, what happens? There's a pause here. Judah doesn't just make one mistake. The Bible records another mistake. And we have to understand why later on when we see what happens to Judah, you'll understand that he's not perfect. This next mistake has to do with his daughter-in-law, Tamar. So Judah had 3 sons at this time. The first was Ur. Ur married Tamar and he died. in the Jewish law, the next son is supposed to then, marry the woman also for her brother's sake, for his brother's sake. But Onan refused to do what his job was, and you can read about it, but God also killed him. So Judah promised that his third son, Shelah or something, would be for Tamar. But he didn't give his third son to Tamar. So Tamar dressed up as a prostitute, and waited, and then Judah saw her, and he actually slept with her. He didn't know it was Tamar. And then, when they finished, she asked for proof, that he would pay her, and she got his signet and his staff. But then he couldn't find her. He sent the goat, and so he just said, well, bahala na. He didn't want to get embarrassed. But then, people discovered that Tamar was pregnant, and they said she has to die, because how is she pregnant? She has no husband yet. Then she gives, this is the verse, when she was being brought out, she sent her father-in-law saying, I am with child by the man who these things belong to. Please examine and see whose signet ring and cords and staff are these. You're Judah. Judah sees them, he recognizes them and says, it's a very important phrase, she is more righteous than I. So Judah, and he did not have relations with her again. So at this point, we see for the first time an acknowledgement of wrong. This is the first time, Judah sold his brother, didn't say anything. But this time, he says, she is more righteous than I. This is a very important turning point in the life of Judah. What happens after? I gave you a chart because we're going to save time. We're going to jump the story. Judah was sold by his brothers at 17. Joseph. I'm going to have a hard time. There's Joseph, there's Judas, there's Judah, and Jesus, and all the names start with J. And, it's like my kids. It's all T. So, Joseph is sold by his brothers at 17. Judah sins with Tamar sometime after that. Joseph becomes ruler when he's 30. So how many years have passed since Judah sold his brother? 13 years. This is where you can find it in Genesis. Then there's famine of 7 years after Joseph becomes ruler. And so this is now 20 years later. What happens? Judah and his brothers have to go back to Egypt. Not back, they have to go to Egypt for the first time. Why does Judah have to go to Egypt? There is a famine, not just in Egypt, in all the land. So I want now to fast forward to 21 years later. There's a famine, and they hear there's food in Egypt. And you guys know the story. Joseph became ruler, and by God's wisdom, they have food. So his brothers go, and they bring money to buy food. And when they buy food, Joseph recognizes each of them. And he tells his steward, put the money back in their sacks. And then they go back. And then he discovers their money because he sends someone after them. And they come back saying, we didn't do this. And Joseph tells them, look, leave one brother. So, leave your one brother to be confined in prison. The rest of you go back and bring the food home. What is Joseph doing? Joseph is now testing his brothers. He's not sure what's going on with them. He wants to see who they are. So he makes them promise the next time they come back, they have to bring their other brother. So the 10 brothers go, and he lets them go home. But look at what happens. They say to one another, this is the brothers, truly, we are guilty concerning our brother. Because we saw the distress in his soul when he pleaded, yet we would not listen. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. You know, the years, 21 years later, they are still thinking of what they did. Do you guys know that feeling when you did something wrong and it just stays there in your heart and you think, you know what, this is not a good thing. Well, these guys have been living with this guilt for 21 years. And they haven't told their dad the truth, but they know the truth. So what happens? They have now to go back. There's not enough food. Someone is left in Egypt, they're one brother, but they have to bring Benjamin back. But you know Benjamin is now the favorite son. So Judah did not become the favorite son. When Joseph disappeared and they thought he died, everyone thinks Joseph is dead. Benjamin became the favorite son. So the father did not learn. He has another favorite. It's not Judah, it's Benjamin. So Judah says to his father, send Benjamin with me, and we will arise that we may live. They need food. We as well as you and our little ones, I myself, I will be surety. Because Jacob does not want to send Benjamin. He said, I lost my one son, I don't want to lose my other. But Judah says, I will be surety. Ako magsasagot. You guys know surety, right? When someone borrows, you have to sign guarantor. He said, I will be surety, hold me responsible if I do not bring him back and set him before you. Let me bear the blame before you forever. So Judah says, I will be the guarantor. What happens? They go back. They meet Joseph. They don't know it's Joseph. Joseph says, hey, here's your other brother. Let's eat at my house. They eat at his house. He sits at a different table. They're eating. And then he says, go home. And then he tells his steward, put the cup in Benjamin's sack. Return all the money again, but this time put the cup in Benjamin's sack. So they are leaving, and they meet them again and say, you stole something. And they say, we didn't steal anything. But if you find something, you can kill him. And we will all become slaves. They say that. You think they should have checked the sacks first, right? Then they open the sacks and they find the cup in Benjamin's sack. So they all tear their robes and they go back to face Joseph. Now what's happening? So we're getting to the end, guys. I'm sorry, it's a nice story, but it's a long story. Judah says, what can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? And how can we justify ourselves? You hear what he's saying? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. I wonder what he meant when he said that. Was he talking about what happened to Joseph, right? He said, God has found out, behold, we are my Lord's slaves, both we and the one in whose possession the cup has been found. So he says, we will be your slaves. But Joseph makes an interesting statement. Joseph says, I will give you a way out. He says, I will not make you all slaves. Far be it from me to do this. The man whose possession the cup has been found, only he shall be my slave. So he said, he didn't say I'll kill him. I'll make him my slave. You go in peace to your father. This is a very interesting out. Because in this statement, suddenly, Benjamin can be removed. And Benjamin won't be killed. So Judah and the brothers, they think Joseph is dead. But in this case, Benjamin will just become a slave. And they can all go home. So the second favorite son will be gone. There is no one left. Judah will now be the next in line. But what does Judah do? This time, Judah could have said, I had no choice. The ruler wanted to take Benjamin. I didn't do anything wrong. Sorry na lang. But what did Judah do? Judah said, can I speak to you? Right? He says, can I talk to you? He doesn't know he's Joseph. And do not be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh. He says, my Lord asked his servant, saying, you have a father or a brother? So he's saying, you asked us if we have a father or a brother. We said, we have an old father and a little child in his old age. That's Benjamin. Now his brother is dead. Now this is Joseph, right? He says, his brother is dead. So Joseph is listening to Judah tell him. And he says, he alone is left of this mother, and his father loves him. You know, Judah acknowledges, I am not the favorite son. He said, you know, you asked us, we told you we have a dad, and this is his favorite son. Not me, Benjamin. He says, now therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, when he sees that the lad is not with us, he will die. Thus your servants will bring the gray hair of your servant our father to show. So Judah says to Joseph, if this boy, our youngest brother, does not go home, it will cause my father so much pain. You know, Judah remembered. Can you imagine for 21 years, you have family dinner, and there's one empty seat. And you see your father as you're eating, looking at that empty seat. And you sit there knowing it was you that made that seat empty. And just for 2 pieces of silver, can you imagine for 21 years, just watching your dad suffer, knowing you did it? Do you think that would change a man? You know, I hope it would, right? So Judah, for 21 years, had this thought process going on. And he finally got it right when he had a second chance to do something different. When Joseph, Pharaoh, was going to take Benjamin, Judah said, please let me stay instead. He said, please let your servant remain instead of the lad, a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go with his brothers. For how shall I go to my father if the lad is not with me? For fear that I see the evil that would overtake my father. You know, Judah finally got it right. And after 21 years, he asked the right question. Instead of asking, what can I get? Judah said, what will this do to my father? And that is the right question. Not just for Judah, for all of us. You know, Judah understood that he had a choice. He could profit himself, or he could bring joy to his father. And he this time said, please take me instead. What was Judah doing? Judah offered his own life as a slave. You know, Judah did not know that Joseph was his brother, right? He didn't know. So in Judah's mind, he will never see his family again. He will never see his brothers again. He will never see his dad again. He is not the favorite son. He will never get his birthright, but it's okay. I get to do something to make up for what I did 21 years ago. And you know, we all have that opportunity in our lives to make up for the wrong we've done every day. God gives us a chance while we're living to live for Him. What is true repentance? It is a change of mind which results in a change of action, which has to do with going back to God. It's always that, right? It's not just remorse, but what is the change of action? It is, I will do better, Lord. I will run to you and I will do better. So let us look at this chart. Fake repentance, remorse with no change of heart. True repentance, a change of heart leading to a change of behavior. Fake repentance, regret with no return. True repentance, I think this is the most important part, returns to God to restore again and again and again. Fake repentance gives up and doesn't see God. True repentance does not give up because of God. Fake repentance leads to death. True repentance leads to life. What happened? Joseph couldn't take it. When he saw Judah offer himself, Joseph said, I am your brother. God did this even though you meant it for harm. Don't be angry at yourselves. Joseph actually says, hey, it's okay. And then he says, go get your dad. Bring him back, the whole family. Can you imagine Judah from thinking he would be a slave for the rest of his life to seeing his brother there and then realizing, I get to tell Dad, Joseph is alive. Do you know when you read the verses, I didn't show them here, it says Jacob was like at the point of death. But when he heard that Joseph was alive, he said, I will get up, I will go to Egypt and see my son. He lives, I think, for like 20 more years or something like that. Like, you know, people when they're discouraged, and then suddenly there's hope added, they can live longer. You know, hope, it brings joy to our hearts. You know, our health is really connected to our hope. It's so true. But can you imagine if you're Judah, the joy as you're going home, Dad, I'm so excited. He tells his dad, and his dad, they all moved to Egypt. The family is complete. Can you imagine the first family dinner where they're all together and not one empty chair? Do you think Judah would have imagined this possible? You know, if Judah did not do what he did, there would be 2 empty chairs. And they would still be not in Egypt, right? But there was no empty chair. You know, sometimes when we go back to God, we think we're going to lose. But the truth is we're actually going to gain everything. So Judah, they're all together. What happens? Years later, when Jacob's about to die, he blesses his children. He calls them all. Let's look at Judah's blessing. He said, assemble yourselves. So the first 3, not so nice. But Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. This sounds like the dream of Joseph. Judah, the sons of your father will bow to you. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. What a promise. Nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes. This is until Jesus comes. And he will rule the world forever. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Do you know who is in the line of Jesus? Judah, the traitor of his brother. Judah, the one who slept with Tamar. But Judah, who repented. You know who else is in the line of Jesus? Rahab the prostitute. Ruth the Moabite. It's all these broken people. But what makes them who they are? They all went to God. What is the road to true repentance? As we close, I want you to hear a testimony. Can I call up Joy Songa?